Greetings from the International Council for Small Business. This is the ICSB Exchange webinar. We'll start in 10 seconds or less. Greetings again. This is Ayman Tarabishi, ICSB Executive Director of the International Council for Small Business and Deputy Chair of the Department of Management at the George Washington University. Today's ICSB Exchange webinar title is Where to Play, 3 Steps for Discovering Your Most Valuable Market Opportunities. I am delighted and excited to introduce the panelist and the book author for Where to Play, Dr. Marc Gruber. He is Vice President for Innovation at EPFL and a professor at the College of Management of Technology, where he holds the Chair of Entrepreneurship and Technology Commercialization. Marc also acted as Associate and as a Deputy Editor at the Academy of Management Journal, AMG, the highest-ranked empirical research journal in management. He is the co-author with Dr. Sharon Tal of Where to Play, 3 Steps for Discovering Your Most Valuable Market Opportunities. Dr. Marc, greetings, welcome to ICSB, and we are just delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Raj, for this warm welcome, Ayman, and it's a true pleasure to be here. Thank you for this kind invitation to discuss where to play with you. I think this is a very good time to start thinking strategically about your business. I know we are, many of us, all of us actually are under a lot of pressure given the crisis that we have, this pandemic that we are observing, where we are looking for short-term solutions, operational support. But I think now it's also a very important time to start thinking strategically about your business. If you look at it, what's happening, the business landscape is changing rapidly. With it, the opportunity landscape, with this pandemic, we actually realized that there are huge problems that remain unsolved, that are not well solved. Think about the hospital beds, the tracing, the equipment that can be repurposed now. And with this change, there's always major opportunities coming. And it's now actually the time to get your companies ready to also think strategically about the opportunities that are out there for you. In other words, use this time not only to be in a reactive mode and to try to fight the fires. And this is all important. I fully understand the cash flow management, etc., but also prepare the organization for what is up there in terms of new opportunities coming, because the tide will shift again, and you want to be ready and able to execute to the best possible way and identify new growth domains. I'm going to introduce today a tool to you that I've developed with Sharon Tal. She's my co-author of Where to Play, a fantastic human being, a wonderful colleague. Together we have written the Market Opportunity Navigator, Where to Play book. It's a book that allows you to systematically identify opportunities, something where we believe that this can only happen by chance. I come back to that later on. I'm going to illustrate this a lot with technology later on, but what I will also do in the end of this webinar is to show that this is the tool is actually applicable to all types of competences, your personal competences, if you want to look at this as well. I'm going to share with you the story of one of the journalists who was interviewing me, who has basically said, look, I applied Where to Play, the Market Opportunity Navigator, to my own competences, and I identified many new opportunities that are super exciting to me. And what I want to also point out that the tool is inexpensive to use. It's quick. You don't have to spend much you have to basically spend time, because the tool is for free out there. You can download the worksheets that I will be showing on wheretoplay.co. That's wheretoplay.co. And it only costs you time, the time and dedication in your team. And I think because it's about creativity, it's about the new frontiers, it's also something that in this time where we get almost negative news by the hour, that we can think about something positive. And I think that that's also important for us as human beings to have a positive outlook on elements, and identifying opportunities for your business is by definition something positive. So make use of all the free available support elements that we have online. I come back to that at the end of the webinar as well, but it's important for me to point it out that what we have here is an offering that is free to use. You don't have to pay license fees, nothing like this. Except, of course, if you want to buy the book, that's a different story there. My publisher actually insists on getting some money for the book, but that's actually quite normal. Let me show you quickly what we want to do. So I foreshadowed some of the content, but let's do this more systematically. I first want to show you the changing competitive landscape, what my colleague Rita McGrath calls a change from industries to arenas, how companies nowadays compete. And this is actually quite important to understand also in the context of the crisis that we are facing now, because the landscape will change. It is already changing now, and you will see opportunities in domains that are adjacent to you that could promise a lot of new growth. The second point will be entirely devoted to the Market Opportunity Navigator. I will illustrate how the tool works with a simple example. I say it's also an exciting example. It's a company that was started here at EPFL in Lausanne, my home school, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, a drone company. I will then move in the third point to broaden basically the line of thought towards the Lean Startup Toolset. Steve Blank, the initiator, the person behind the Lean Startup Toolset, actually adopted the Market Opportunity Navigator as the fourth tool in this toolset. And I'm going to explain to you how this tool works hand in hand with the other tools in the Lean Startup Toolset. So it's plug and play essentially, and together they bring more value than in isolation. And then I conclude with very hands-on suggestions of where you can get the free support that I already alluded to. Next. So what we are going to do is to focus on the first example. And let me just put out this example to you. Now, we have a company that is a watch company that has been in the business for the longest time. We have many of those here in Switzerland, but there are watch companies all across the globe. And nowadays with technology, you can say, hey, I can actually produce something different. I can enter a new terrain. And if you see this concrete example, once you add sensors to the watch, you can actually become a medical device company if you measure the heart rate, if you are measuring the blood sugar levels, etc., etc. So what this fundamentally means is that not only the products, your services can be reinvented through new technology, but ultimately your company can be reinvented through new technology. And this, to understand this, is actually quite powerful because it opens up an incredible growth curve for you as entrepreneurs, as business owners of small businesses, but also of medium-sized and large businesses. What I'm going to explain actually applies to all types of businesses, and it's an important question to answer for all types of businesses. Next. So what I can, if you look at this example with the sensors, what is behind that is a very fundamental shift in terms of technology. We call this the technological disruptions. And I find this graph from a colleague, this table, quite powerful because it illustrates not only how the prices have decreased in major technology areas. See everything from sensors that are used for autonomous driving that used to cost $20,000 US, and are now available for less than 100. 3D printing used to be $40,000, it's $100 nowadays. Industrial robots, you see the numbers yourself. Drones have been extremely expensive. Solar energy has come down in price, and biotech, in the biotech arena, the DNA profile of a human being used to be there 10 million, and it's now $100 or even less. And this, by itself, each of these domains enables disruption, but the combination of all of these domains enable even more disruption and new possibilities. And let me illustrate this with another example. If you have drones, for instance, they can disrupt how things are delivered, how things are observed. But beyond that, if you combine drones, for instance, with artificial intelligence, these drones can do many more additional things. If you combine drones with solar energy, this can have lots of new applications. So underlying what I'm saying here is actually a very fundamental insight that we are not only facing one technological disruptions nowadays, but it's a multitude. It's 6, 7, however you want to count this, and it's not only the innovation potential per technological domain, but also the combination, the permutation, if you want to say so, that enables lots and lots of new possibilities. And this is what is actually behind all these changes that we are seeing happening out there in terms of technological progress that is accelerating at an unprecedented speed. And this actually enables companies to rethink who they are, what they want to offer, and to whom they want to offer it. And that's basically underlying what I'm going to explain later on. And as I foreshadowed as well, I'm going to open up the umbrella later on and also talk about competences more widely. But let's stick with technological competences, because I know that many of you out there are interested in technology, base their businesses on technology, and want to understand how they can advance their business by employing new technologies. Next. So if we think about technology as an enabler, of course, we all know that it enables us to refine products, to make them cheaper. That's for many of us obvious. When you look at technology, it's enabling you to have smoother business processes. It also can enhance your business in the sense that it can increase the customer experience and differentiate your company. But I want to focus on the core discipline of growing and disrupting. You're growing your business and disrupting maybe others, which is about identifying new opportunities based on new technologies. And this is helping your company to transform and become maybe a different animal down the road. So this is quite an interesting area to look at by itself. All three would be interesting, but let me focus on the third one because it's so fundamentally enabled by technology and the growth options you will have. Next. So when we think about this, when you look at examples out there, every one of us probably knows Uber. Uber has taken this to heart, and Uber is creative to a significant extent, and in that sense, it needs to be admired. Uber, we know, started in the taxi industry. It then moved into food delivery, and they also offer now wine tours in Napa Valley, which is quite an interesting extension to their business. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If people drink wine, go from one vineyard to the other, it actually makes sense that they have someone who's driving them, a driver, so you can taste more. But what you see here is actually that Uber does not really care which industries they're in. Uber, you can say, is in taxi, but Uber does not care if you tell them they are in taxi. They actually move wherever they can grow. And they move from taxi to food delivery, and Uber Wine is basically tourism. So industry boundaries are very artificial for Uber. And you should ask yourself as a company leader, as a startup entrepreneur, as a large business innovator, why are we so wedded to industry boundaries? Is this maybe just a statistical category that has lost in meaning through all this reinvention that is possible due to technology? Next. So Uber, and as such, is they don't care really about the industry boundaries. They move what Rita McGrath calls in an arena, in a competitive arena. And we're going to look at this concept in a minute. But let me motivate it with 2-3 more examples. Here's an example where everyone knows that Apple is not a car company, but Apple wants to enter the car space, the automotive space. Why? Because Apple says, okay, this is a growth space for us. If people in the future will drive autonomously from A to B, one of their main concerns is, no longer driving. They want to be entertained. And here you make already the connection to what Apple actually is. Apple is an entertainment company that has a great design department and has a great IT department. So many of the capabilities that you need actually to build the car of the future are already on Apple's turf. Of course, companies like Daimler, etc., all the established car companies are challenged very fundamentally by the capabilities that Apple has. Next. And if you want to look at this more systematically, you can say, look, Apple has a certain set of capabilities, the existing competences that are used for the iPhone, iPad, the App Store, etc. They build a set of new competences to actually produce a car, thereby reinventing themselves. And their challenge, as you can see on the left side, is to build this new set of competences to build a car. I don't want to say that all this is easy, but this is a managerial task. This is something when you look at the history of what Elon Musk is doing, the initial insight was an entrepreneurial insight. Now it's very much getting the operations done, etc., etc. Yeah? And the same is true for Apple here. If you think about them, they have these existing competences that are meaningful for the car of the future. And in addition, they build now these other competences, which, they can hire away the engineers of the established car companies. They can merge with an established car company. They can buy someone up out there. They can collaborate with someone. However they do it, it's their choice. Yeah? But what's important to see is that the first element here was an entrepreneurial move. No one dictated Apple to actually become a car manufacturer. No one dictated that to them. That was an entrepreneurial move to say, hey, that's a growth space we can move into. And if you think about the Uber example, the analog that I just used here, Apple in this sense is actually also moving into a new growth space. They don't really care that there's an industry boundary between them and the car industry. There is one, yes, but they say, hey, we can grow in that domain. Let's do it. Yeah? For Daimler, and just to complete the story here, the challenge is the opposite one. They have the existing competences which are used in the traditional cars, motorbikes, etc., etc., and they would have to acquire the new competences, and that's what they're doing at great pace right now, with great pain as well, to become viable players in the car industry of the future, in the car space of the future, I should say. Next. And let me share with you two more examples, that we all know, so that this story that I'm unfolding here is actually motivated from multiple dimensions, and many of you can find themselves in one or the other story more closely. We know the example of Nokia. This was a company, or is a company that was a major player in the cell phone space. And they had, this is a cover from November 2007, basically the time they were at the peak of their performance. They had 1 billion customers. And the question here that the Forbes magazine raised is, can anyone catch the cell phone king? Very much alluding to this idea that they say, okay, we have the cell phone industry, the number 2 might buy up the number 3 and therefore become larger than Nokia. What we know from history is actually that something very different happened. Next, please. We know that it was not the cell phone companies that entered the space. It was actually the computer manufacturers who said, okay, that's a new growth space for us. It's the cell phone industry. So it's basically a miniaturized computer. We are carrying around little computers nowadays. They're called phones, but essentially they are no longer phones. But when you think about what the impact that this had on Nokia, it is extremely profound. Here you see Nokia in November 2007. That's about where this graph starts. 50% market share. And Nokia rapidly lost in market share because of these other new entrants, the Samsungs and the Apples of the world, And look at this timeline. It's from 2007 up to 2012. Within 4.5-5 years, they went basically from hero to zero. They attempted to make up for their lack of IT competence by partnering also with Microsoft. This didn't work out so well. You see it here as well. But that's not the story that I want to tell. The main story here is one where actually computer manufacturer realized, Apple and Samsung, that they can move into another space and there's a new growth terrain. For Nokia, it was more on the reflective side, on the defensive side, seeing if they can survive. Next, please. And I want to share a final example that we know of and can look at on this from this perspective as well. Kodak versus Fujifilm, the two big players in analog film, analog photography. The older ones among us will still remember those days. The younger ones out there might remember it from looking at the photo albums of their fathers and mothers and the grandfathers. These companies were the leaders in the space, and the fate of both it cannot be any different. It's Kodak is basically on the cemetery of companies, unfortunately, while Fujifilm did something extremely remarkable. What they did is to say, hey, we are actually a film company, analog film, but we possess a lot of competences that are valuable in their own right because we are extremely good in anything that has to do with the chemistry, with the processes that you need to develop film. Next, please. So they said, okay, we might be a film company, but actually we are more than that. We can reinvent ourselves. And this is actually taken from Fujifilm's website. You see on the right, they created this nice graph, the tree structure, and said, look, at the bottom of what we are today, we are a film company with competences in this analog film. But at the bottom, there is this competence. And from this competence, a set of new types of opportunities has sprung. And you see this here. You know, the tree has lots of interesting branches. It's astropore filters, gas barrier films, sour gas membranes, gas membranes, desalination activities, etc. And what they basically did is to say, hey, we try to understand our competences, where we are good at, you know, and you see it highlighted in red, what I took from the website. They became an expert in many different advanced material technologies because they were such a great film company, including coatings, membranes, organic compounds. And then they say by combining these abilities with newly developed technologies, the company today creates unique materials that can be used in an extremely wide variety of applications, including dark desalination, gas membranes, and astropore filters. And I find this a remarkable entrepreneurial imagination story. These guys had really an entrepreneurial mindset. They were with the back against the wall and basically came up with these fantastic new opportunities, the markets in which they could play. When we bring this now together, you know, if you think about this example, the previous one, this one here is one where a company is very much with the back against the wall and looks forward into different growth opportunities, yeah, in different other domains. This is from a conceptual perspective, not so far away from what we have seen actually with Uber or with Apple, Uber saying, hey, we can actually grow in other domains. We don't really care about these industry boundaries. These are only constraining us. Yeah? So the fundamental analog of similarity among all these examples that I've shared with you is that there is a competence base. You could add other competences to that base and cater to many, many different other domains. You know? And this is an entrepreneurial insight. This is fundamentally entrepreneurial if you are able to think about this in a proactive manner, looking at multiple opportunities. Next, please. And what this does is then to, if you want to conceptualize this, it helps you to figure out what you can do and what you can potentially do based on a fundamental realization that you might no longer work in an industry, but you can actually compete in an arena. Next, please. So I draw here on Rita McGrath's work, who has done this, I find, very remarkable table summarizing in high precision of what this actually means. She says, okay, in an industry-dominated world, we are focusing oftentimes on goals like positional advantage and market share. You know, having looked at the Nokia example that I cited a few minutes ago, you know, it was about 50% market share for Nokia. The biggest threat there is these intra-industry moves, you know, that the second buys up the third in the industry, you know, that the Ericsson cell phone company buys up the third one. You know, we hardly remember the third one anymore and becomes larger than the first one. That's the biggest threat. And if I move down the table, the likely acquisition behavior in this worldview is to say, hey, who in my industry can I acquire to become even larger, more powerful, etc. That's a worldview that we know that where we have our tools. You know, those of you who studied management are familiar with the name of Michael Porter, Porter's 5 forces, the industry analysis, determining industry profitability, how you can then position yourself within the industry, what is your competitive advantage, etc. This we all know. But let's assume for a minute that this might be the old world, and there's indication that this is actually the old world, that nowadays companies actually compete in an arena. And the Uber example, all the examples I used are fantastic illustrations of this. What would this mean? This means that the goal, consider Uber, you know, for a second, the goal here is capturing territory, capturing growth space. The measure of success is the share of the potential opportunity space. And I agree that this is a fluffy concept, but I come back to that in a second. That should not be an excuse, you know, that we should not think about it that way. You know, if it's a fluffy concept, we have to have tools that make it more tractable, understandable, and more objectivized. The biggest threat is inter-industry moves. the Ubers of the world getting into your industry, the Apples of the world getting into your industry, etc. And if we move down the table again, the likely acquisition behavior is about new capability acquisition, often across industry boundaries. Think about this example of Apple that I have just cited, where it's very much about Apple buying up capabilities, developing capabilities to become a credible player in the automotive space. But if we compare these worlds, and you can talk about this for half an hour, it's very exciting to compare because it also trickles down within the organization how people think and which type of goals that they have. For me, the main point here is one where we say, hey, we need to have tools as well that allow you to maneuver successfully in the arena. And one of the most important tools that you can have to be able to maneuver in this arena is actually to understand what your opportunity space is and to try to understand how to then to be a credible and important player with these new opportunities, to exploit them, to grow further. Think about, again, the Uber model. You can say, I work, in taxi, but I can see these other growth opportunities and I can develop my company proactively throughout these different opportunities that I've realized. Next, please. So when you want to highlight what I think is quite important here is to have tools that enable you to capture territory, to understand what is your share of what is the potential opportunity space and what is the share you want to conquer, and how you then might even actively avoid others from entering your domain by entering their domain. There are different conceptual moves that you can think about as well. Next, please. So the tool that I want to introduce to you today is actually exactly for that. It helps you to understand your arena. It helps you to understand where you can move. And in that sense, it's a tool that helps you in strategic innovation. It's a tool that for the startup helps you to determine if actually the domain you are in is a good one or whether you can or should focus on another domain. For the established companies, be them small or large, that doesn't matter. For the established companies, it's important to understand where else they could play, what other types of growth space they can address. And I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes walking you through this tool. It's an easy tool. It's as easy, as simple as it can be, but without being simplistic. Sharon and I were extremely careful in developing something that lives up to the standards that actually helps companies. We have by now used by tens of thousands of companies out there. We get incredible feedback for the tool. So we know that it works, and that's why we are also proud and happy to share it with you. Next, please. It's a tool that helps you to map the opportunity space. And previously, we have always thought, well, this is a lucky process. All these stories. Oh, I was standing in the shower. I had this idea suddenly. I was drinking a good glass of wine. I had this idea. But this is from a managerial perspective extremely dissatisfying. If you have a company, you cannot send everyone into the shower. You cannot give everyone wine all the time just to be a more creative company that identifies opportunities. So as a manager, as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, you want to have the possibility to have a tool that allows you to systematically identify opportunities, to see which ones are the best ones, and then be very systematic in exploiting them. And underlying this is actually a lot of value creation potential that in doing so you can start to exploit. So what we have developed based on a lot of research is the Market Opportunity Navigator. And let me spend some time to thank and appreciate the wonderful colleagues I've been working with and I had the pleasure to work with over the last 15, 20 years. You see here Ian McMillan out of the Wharton School, Jimmy Thompson from Wharton, who was a PhD student also of mine, and below there is Sharon Tal, who was a PhD student as well of mine, but now is an independent consultant and educator at Technion in Israel. And what we did is to basically, after 15 years of research on the topic, which always excited us as a topic, say, hey, there's so many learnings that we got out of our research, and with this research with several thousands of companies in the end, some with case studies, some with large quantitative data, that we said, okay, there's so many learnings. How can we possibly put this all into a tool that is helping entrepreneurs and innovators and established firms to become more successful by having a systematic tool? Next, please. And by the way, if some of you want these papers, just drop me a line. I'll give you my email later on, and I'm happy to share them with you. What this tool does is, we call it the Market Opportunity Navigator. It's featured in this book called Where to Play, and it's about this opportunity space and how you can identify and exploit it. So you have 3 steps that are mapped into the Opportunity Navigator. You see a schematic of this navigator at the bottom right, and I'm going to walk you through this in a second in more detail, but just big picture. It's the first step is about understanding what are the opportunities that exist for us based on our existing competences and potentially new technology. Second, what are the most attractive ones? Among all those that you see, what are the ones that have the highest potential? And then what are the ones we should focus on? For a startup, this is typically 1, maybe 2 if they are closely related. For a large company, this can be a portfolio of opportunities. So the approaches, the possibility to exploit it is somewhat different, but the first and second step are very closely aligned. Next, please. What we did is to work also with a designer to make this tool as appealing as possible. Sharon always said she wanted to have a book that is like a cookbook where you get hungry while you look at the pictures. We wanted to have the same effect here. While you read the book, while you look at the tools, you actually say, hey, we want to apply it. And here what we see is the main setup. You have 3 steps: the market opportunity set, the attractiveness map, and then as a third step, the focus dartboard. We call this the agile focus dartboard because there is a hidden, or not a hidden, it's a very explicit but very important feature. It's the agility that you bake into the DNA of your company, and I come back to that in a second. But these are the 3 steps, and behind each of the steps, we have created a worksheet that allows you to ask the right questions. And this is quite important to understand too. Why? Because any tool out there should help you think through problems, business problems, and challenges, and should help you ask the right questions. That's what a good tool should do. It should help you structure your thinking and come to good conclusions. So how we did this is to say, hey, in order to guide your thinking based on our research, based on other people's research, we want to develop worksheets that help you to frame your company, the competences, see more opportunities, evaluate them, and then to focus. And that's what I want to walk you through in the next couple of minutes with an example, the viability example. Next, please. Before I go into the viability example, let me show you exactly what the 3 steps entail so that you also comprehend more easily what the worksheets are about. The first one is the opportunity set. It's pictured as a little shopping bag. This is basically the first point here, is to figure out all the opportunities, the growth spaces, opportunities that you can see in your arena. Essentially defining your growth arena, what I referred to earlier. And this has a value in itself. It's all the ideas you can imagine, and we guide you through how you can imagine even more. The second step is about the attractiveness map. This is actually a very important step because not all opportunities are created equal. You cannot, of course, have a crystal ball, but with a few elements, you can determine whether some opportunities might be better than others. This is, again, not a crystal ball, but it helps you to shape and understand what opportunities might be, have a higher challenge level than others. And there's actually, once you get into this, there are some opportunities that are less uncertain than others. Some are very close, some are very challenging. So you get a better understanding of what types of opportunities are in front of you. They come in with a different nature. Understanding the nature of your opportunities is actually what the outcome of the second step should be. You see that we have 2 axes, one axis covering the potential, the other axis covering the challenge. If you combine this, you have then 4 quadrants. You have a high challenge, high potential quadrant that we labeled the moonshot quadrant. I jokingly label this also the Elon Musk quadrant. Elon Musk is basically doing everything that is up there. For him, it would be actually the Mars shot quadrant. You have the high potential, low challenge quadrant, which are the gold mines. Those opportunities actually exist. They are great to identify. You have those that have a low challenge level and a low potential level. We call them the quick wins. And then you have high challenge, low potential, which are the questionables. This is a quadrant which is not so exciting to be in, but it's good to realize that you're in. Maybe you can shift and adopt the opportunity. And the third is the Agile Focus Dark Map. Once you have mapped your portfolio of opportunities, you have your options. The question is, which one should you focus on? What could be a good plan B? And maybe what could be a good future growth option in case the first one should work out. So what this does is, the third step is to say, hey, I have actually, in case my first opportunity doesn't go well, something in the back of my hand. And you don't work on this much, it's just lingering there. Or if the first one goes well, we have more to come. And this actually helps you to understand a lot of things in your company that I'm going to point out later on shortly. Next, please. I want to illustrate this with the example of flyability. This is a drone company that you see here. They did a drone in a cage. This drone in a cage is quite particular. They got inspired by the Fukushima disaster and said, hey, if there are these robots that are falling over the rubble, maybe we can do better. We have this drone in a cage that can bump against the wall and doesn't fall down because the little propellers don't get damaged. And what they are, where they can apply it is, you see it here in inspection. They can have the police force with it. They can go into what's important in Switzerland, into glaciers, if there's an avalanche, etc. Yeah? But for them, this drone has many, many uses. As flyability is nowadays a small and medium-sized enterprise. They used to be a startup. And for them, it was extremely important to understand what the opportunities face this arena is. Next, please. So they applied Worksheet 1. And that is divided into two parts. The first part lists the abilities of their technology, of the drone, independent of any use. And that's quite important to understand. It's independent of any use. So you have unique accessibility, aviation abilities, the imagery system, and you can have collision tolerance. It has a decoupled light protection case. It can operate in a range of temperatures and pressures. So it has this unique accessibility. You can fly, of course, with on-site video piloting. It can have an imagery system, thermal recording, real-time video streaming, remotely adjustable. It can do post-mission analysis. This is the first important step that you need to realize for your companies, be it a small one, a startup, or a large company. What are your abilities, your capabilities, your competences, independent of any application domain? And my colleague Erwin Daniel calls this the delinking step. You delink basically your competences from any application that you currently have. And this is for some companies easier. The younger you are, typically the easier it is. The older you are, the more established you are, the more difficult it is because the competences are strongly linked with ideas about the application. But try to make sure to distance yourself from any of these applications. What Flyability did is to do a workshop where they said, okay, how can we, based on these competences, which type of application domains, which type of opportunities can we identify? Next, please. And what they did is say, okay, we have identified a couple. One is in industrial inspection. Another one is in infrastructure inspection. So the built environment infrastructure. And the third one would be about everything dealing with people, security, search and rescue, as you see it here. In industrial inspection, you have a couple of sub-points. You can say it's about oil and gas, the storage tanks, the pressure vessels that you could inspect with a drone, or the power plants, the thermal boilers where the drone can fly around and inspect it, nuclear rooms, the wind turbines, the wind farms, they need to be inspected. In maritime as well, you have a couple of applications. In infrastructure, open air facilities, you might think about bridges that you could inspect with a drone. Electric landlines would be a similar one. Indoor facilities, sewers and mines. Then on the right side, the security, search and rescue, the police forces, the military could use such a drone if there are demonstrations, if there's something to observe, like the curfews some towns have now. The rescue forces, the firefighters, avalanche rescue forces can use this as well. And what you see here is already quite amazing because it basically tells you, well, we can grow in all of these domains with the same set of competencies. And this reminds us a bit of what the Uber example. Hey, there's growth space in all of these domains. So one natural implication is, or question is, where should we focus on? The next one would be, well, what could be an additional growth space if the first one should work out? Or if the first one doesn't work out, what would be a good plan B? And when you think about this multiplicity, this portfolio of opportunities that is now in front of you, you actually can, start thinking about your company in a very different way. It's a growth engine actually that you're building. And you are, if you are a startup, you are very diligent now about picking your brand name. You would call your company something like Flyability probably, because with the name Flyability, you can perform, act in all of these domains. If you would, you can say, if you would not have this multiplicity of views, what is critical is to say, hey, I might call my company Drones for Inspection of Thermal Boilers in powerplants.com, which doesn't give you any flexibility down the road. So in that sense, when we think about it, by the sheer fact that you see a multiplicity of opportunities allows you to think about your company in a very more agile way. You can get brand names registered that help you to maneuver through all types of possibilities down the road. You can write your patents in a different way. You can hire a different workforce, and this puts agility into the DNA of your company. Next, please. Once you've figured out this opportunity set, the next step would be to say, okay, these are my preferred opportunities. I put them in the Opportunity Navigator in the bag. Among those that Flyability wanted to consider more closely are these 5. The next step would be to ask, which one is a better opportunity than another one? And that's where the next step, the worksheet 2, comes into play. Next, please. This is a worksheet that Sharon and me developed based on 50 years of venture capital research. Venture capitalists, most of you are familiar with venture capital. They have created a business around investing in high growth startups. So they are experts in evaluating opportunities. And there's a lot of research on how you evaluate opportunities. And we draw on this and spend actually a lot of time to come up with a set of criteria that is parsimonious and covers basically 95% of the main criteria that are out there. You have 3 criteria that you use to evaluate each opportunity in terms of its potential, and another 3 that you use to evaluate your opportunities in terms of their challenge. In the interest of time, I'm going to show only the highlights here. It's a compelling reason to buy. It's about the market volume. It's the economic viability that you're looking at in terms of the potential. You have a couple of pointers below. In terms of the challenge, you have the implementation obstacles, the time to revenue, and external risks, basically everything you cannot control. We see here from Flyability the power plants, the thermal boiler as an example. For Flyability, this would, if you look at the potential side, end up in roughly a high overall potential. This can be, this is an evaluation that you do quick and dirty initially, but then you try to back it up with market tests, etc. But this forces you to be fairly complete on the potential side as well as on the challenge side. And what you do then is to do this for all the opportunities you consider in a narrower set. And that gives you, next please, the opportunity matrix in the middle, the attractiveness map. And when Flyability mapped all the opportunities, you saw that some were moonshots, some were gold mines, and some were questionables. We are not prescriptive at all with the tool to say, hey, you should do the gold mine, you should do the moonshot. If you're feeling suicidal, you might do a questionable. That's up to you, but don't complain to us. If you look at this, there's a beauty of saying I have now a view of the opportunities. Some might be more uncertain than others, so even uncertainty becomes an endogenous factor. But what we see here is actually powerful in the sense that it also allows you to think about combinations of what you want to do over time. And that is then the third step, the Agile Focus Dartboard, where you try to understand how a portfolio, the opportunities are related to each other. And what's quite interesting here is that you have individual opportunities, but the multiplicity of opportunities allows you to say some might be more closely related in terms of products, some others might be more closely related in terms of markets. Next, please. So we have a third worksheet that helps you actually to figure out where to focus. You pick one. Here, Flyability picked their favorite one, power plant. That's entirely your choice. And then you compare the main one that is listed up there in red to the others. So you have the main one relative to the oil, gas, and storage tank, the main one, the power plants towards the maritime vessel inspection, and the main one towards police surveillance. and you rate each of these opportunities in terms of their product relatedness and their market relatedness. That's what this worksheet does. And then you say, okay, is this a growth opportunity or is this rather backup opportunity? A backup opportunity, as we explained here, should not share the same risk as your plan A. That wouldn't be a good plan B. Any plan B that has the same risk as plan A is not a good plan B. And then you have the final step. You say, do I keep it open or would I place that in storage or should I pursue it now? The pursue now is for the power plants. The others in this example are kept open. If you are an established company, you can, of course, say, hey, I do 3, 4 of those, or I do 10 of those in parallel as smaller experiments, real options, as we call them. Next, please. This brings you then to the third step, which is the agile focus dartboard. For liability, you have the pursue now. You have 3 that you keep open, and you have 1 that they placed in storage, which they didn't want to consider further. And actually, this place in storage ring is quite important. Why? Because it creates what we call mental hygiene. You just don't have to worry about this anymore. And this, you can take this basically off the plate. But you have, in a way, what you focus on with your venture. You have a very sharp focus on this. But the others create what we call agility. That's why it's called agile focus dartboard. You can take them as plan B or future growth options. Big picture, what this does is to create the opportunity landscape, this arena. First step, it helps you to understand the structure in this arena, how good, how bad these opportunities are. Second step, and then helps you to strategize about them, what you should do and what could be good plan B or plan A option. What this does is to give you also an understanding of the growth engine that is within your company. And that's why I want to come back on this idea of strategic innovation and support that I pointed out initially. That's exactly what it does. These are times when you think about this. And second, this is something where when we talk, for instance, to venture capitalists, they would love to see this with all companies that apply for funding. Why? Because this is actually giving them an understanding of where this company can grow and how it can be de-risked to some extent. Next, please. So what is important here is that you actually allow yourself for cognitive flexibility. Without any cognitive flexibility, this would not work. So in this example here with EndoArt, is a company also out of EPFL in Lausanne in Switzerland. The inventors, Nikos Diathopoulos, and that's a slide from him, basically said, hey, I have stents that help me fight congenital heart disease. That's my first application. But actually, wherever blood flows in my body, this physical principle and the mechanical device can be used. And therefore, next please, he said, okay, it's about not only heart disease prevention, but blood flow technology. And this all happens only in your head, and that's important to understand. You are zooming out from the concrete towards allowing you to be more than heart disease prevention, blood flow technology. And you can actually think maybe this company is even about flow technology, which would open the opportunity space even more. So for the watch company, that was the example I gave earlier. Maybe it's not only about measuring the time, but measuring anything like your wrist. So you, by being able to think about your company a bit more open way, you can suddenly say, hey, there's actually growth space. And what is problematic for many of us who are in established business, that we are too much focused on the daily business and lose this capability to zoom in and zoom out. Okay, next please. 2 more points before I leave you today. This is not only applicable to tech companies, these are applicable to all kinds of competences. This is Frank, he's a journalist with the Irish Times, and when he interviewed me, he said, Marc, I actually read your book and I realized, next please, that I'm not only able to do journalism, but I'm actually can be much more. So he applied the process, next please, and he said, hey, I'm the business journalist, I have a fantastic network, I know the hottest business topics, so what I can start doing is to give my own speeches. I can start hosting my own conferences where people pay a certain amount every day. Through my connections, I can actually use my competences, my networks to attract customers, to attract speakers. I know the companies, I know the CEOs, they would come, they pay a fee. So what he did is to use the Navigator to understand his personal competences and think about them more widely. And this is very eye-opening. And I encourage you also to do this individually for yourself, because it's not only about technology here, it's actually about anything that is a competence that you also carry yourself. In a way, you can say it's almost like a self-help book. Okay, next, please. The final thought that I want to leave you with is that we have this tool as a latest edition of the Lean Toolset by Steve Blank. Steve Blank, next please, has blogged about this tool last year, and he said, look, and that's what you see on the next slide is actually the snapshot from his blog. He said, hey, I add this to the Lean Toolset, next please, and that's highlighting what's in the blog here on this slide. Basically tells you how to play. The business model canvas helps you to understand the business model in a defined market. Customer development helps you to understand the customers in that market. Agile engineering helps you to understand how to develop a minimum viable product in a certain market. This is how to play, how to make a profit in a certain domain. But these tools don't tell you yet where to start looking for a business opportunity for a growth space, And there might be better ones, there might be worse ones. And the worst thing you can do is spend a lot of time on business modeling, customer development, and agile engineering in a weak domain, in a weak market. So the Market Opportunity Navigator actually adds to this tool set. And next, please. So if you want to picture this, this is actually a learning tool that helps you to, on the top, to say, hey, we are looking at the opportunity landscape. We are at our arena. We do this systematically. We have a focal opportunity that we deem to be important and promising. For that, we do the business model canvas. We develop hypotheses. We test them via customer development, agile product development. And that is providing with some learning loop that helps us to create a very important new business, new growth arena. If you want to read more, just type in stop playing target market roulette. That's the link for Steve Blank's blog that he wrote about the tool and how it fits. He also recounts the flyability example very nicely. Next, please. So to conclude, I want to show you where you can get the free support and then conclude with some thoughts and give the word back to Ayman. So what we have assembled is on a website called wheretoplay.co. Not com, but co, where we have the free worksheets, the supporting materials for you to download, videos, examples from other companies, small startups up to large companies who have used the tool. We have testimonials there. We can help you with many ways. We have a free online course on edX that you might want to check out. It's called Find the Right Market for Your Innovation. We have free videos on our YouTube channel from Flyability, the company, and others. And of course, please feel free to email me or my colleague Sharon, who you can get in touch with via the website. You can also follow us on Twitter and on other feeds. Next, please. There's, of course, a book. If you want to read more about it, it's available in multiple languages. It's currently translated into Spanish, but it's available in English, German, Chinese, Vietnamese, French so far. And if you feel that you want to have a book in your native language, reach out to us and we are connecting you to our publisher. This concludes my webinar for today. I hope I inspired you with some new ideas of how to think strategically during these challenging times, how to make your company future ready. The world will get better and we want to be ready for this and have companies that flourish, that thrive, that conquer the new frontier in this changing business landscape. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciated that. And I look forward to seeing you maybe personally in the future or online in the virtual world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marc. This has been absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to ask you one or two questions, but what I'd like to do is invite all the attendees here, if they have a question, to put it on the chat box there, and I'll try to go to as many as possible, but we need more time. So that's the trick here. We need more time. But let me start, Dr. Marc, here. What you see now happening in the world and how companies are quickly adjusting, I think Dr. McGrath will say it's a dynamic marketplace, and quickly adjusting. What are the one or two key points you say to the attendees here and the people that will be listening to the webinar to say, that's why you need this idea, that's why you need these principles? What are the key two takeaways you want to say quickly to say to them, that's what I want to remind you of or explain to you a little bit more strongly?
Yes. I think there are two main points, takeaways. Number one, many companies have understood even before the crisis, they've engaged in innovation activities. It would be fatal to stop these innovation activities now. It might be a reflex because you can cut costs quickly. Don't kill them completely. Maybe put them on the back burner and wait a bit until you have more cash available. But that's one thing. Don't get out of innovation for short-term gains. Just figure out ways to manage innovation, maybe with a lower burn rate. But secondly, this time it's right to actually start thinking very proactively about this changing business landscape. Every day we hear news stories about the big problems that the economies are facing, supply chains are facing, product categories are missing, etc., etc. And this is just, if you want to get something positive out of what's happening, what we see here is an opening up of many, many opportunities for businesses of all sizes, startups, SMEs, large companies. And I think having a more proactive perspective on strategic innovation, leaning back now, taking the time to reflect about what is next is actually one of the best advices I can give. I know we are under lots of operational pressure, myself as well, with running the innovation park at EPFL, but taking the time to actually reflect about the big picture and with this tool helping you systematically to see where the new growth spaces are is actually probably the best advice I can give you. Use this time to prepare your organization.
Good, excellent. So I'm going to compliment you here, and it's not from me, it's coming from Nigeria here. He goes, I am Ayodolo Shiu from Nigeria. I must say that this presentation is fantastic. Initially, I was wondering how it differs from the Lean methodology, but the latter slide stresses that. Be assured I will share this with my students and colleagues in the forthcoming UNILAG Impact Week 2020 in Nigeria. So that's the compliment here. So now
that's fantastic. And let me just add something quickly. If you want to have slide sets about this, they are freely available on SlideShare and via the website. So you can even use our slides. This is all in the open domain, freely available. We want to help the teachers out there too.
Good. So now that was the compliment, the nice part here. Now I'm going to ask you some difficult questions. When does the process? No, nothing is easy. Nothing is free coffee. When in the process do we define a strategy in a company? So that's an interesting question.
When in the class, you mean?
When in the process? When in the process? Yes.
Yes. So when you look at the Lean process, what I would suggest is that you would say, okay, if I'm a startup who wants to enter a market, you can say I start with the second step and say, hey, let me actually understand whether the opportunity I'm pursuing is worthwhile to pursue. And what my own experience and Sharon's experience with the startups is that actually once they do this, they say, maybe the opportunity I'm pursuing is actually not so good. So in that sense, it opens their minds. They are more diligent in understanding what they do. Many of the startups that are out there that are being created are not run by people who have a lot of managerial background, and it's for them in particular understanding how good these opportunities are is vital. So there the process could start with the second step. The process for the larger companies oftentimes starts with the first step, saying, okay, we have a set of competences. If I add now, think about this drone company, AI to the mix and say, hey, what could the drone do if we upgrade it with new technology? So oftentimes in established companies use the method to understand what else is the new growth phase they can exploit with new technology. So it's really about a strategy process that can start in each of those three steps. Ultimately, I think, as we are talking about innovation, it's about a learning journey, and a learning journey has to go through many feedback loops. So as I mentioned earlier, the method works plug and play with the other, with the business model canvas, agile engineering, etc. And each of those allows you to learn. The Market Opportunity Navigator allows you then to learn on a meta level about the opportunities, and then you dive deep and try to understand each opportunities with the tools out there.
That's fantastic. And this is more of an operational question. It says, do you have, just wondering if these slides are digital somewhere? You might want to answer that.
Yes,
is there a digital?
PowerPoint. Yes, we have PowerPoint slides that we are happy to share. They are available on the where2play.co website. You can download them. Please use them as much as you like to use them. We don't take any royalty fee here. They are open domain. Use the tool as much as you want. The worksheets, they are freely available. There's no royalty fee to use them. We want to help the community. We want to help startup businesses to flourish. And that's our main goal here.
That is fantastic. We are up at time, but let me ask you one question, and I'll make an announcement here. Do you consider, is it now the right time to start working on the next phase, or do you want to wait a little bit till this Corona blues moves forward? What's your take on this? That was a question that was asked.
Well, I just think, thank you for that question. I think it's important. And as human beings, I think we need to watch out for ourselves to keep a balance between, all the news we are getting nowadays is negative, and let's find the time to work with our team on some creative activity like this one here that I explained. And I think thinking about collectively within the company, maybe adding other companies to the mix, sharing different industry perspectives to really understand what the arena is that you could play in. That's something fundamentally positive, creative. It's about exciting new growth space. And I think now it's the time to prepare not only your company for the next step, but also to keep the balance within the team, to have some positive news. And nothing is more exciting for a company to say, hey, we can actually do much more than we thought, and we can grow in exciting new domains, because that also gives hope for the time after the crisis. As much as it hits us, as much as it's horrible for many of us, but we are human beings. We need hope too.
Dr. Marc, this is absolutely fantastic. On behalf of ICSB, and we want to thank you for all your time and with your co-author. And ICSB made a call to all to the collective world, and you joined the ICSB family. So we want to thank you tremendously. We need more of this, and I'm going to make the call now on behalf of ICSB. We need to engage in this more. So let us talk about a part 2 maybe and see how we move forward with this. But this is very important. I think everybody on the session would welcome a more in-depth analysis of the toolkit and how to engage more. Roll up your sleeve and let's get to business with it. So we invite you to engage with ICSB and the ICSB family to play more. Maybe that's the right word here. We invite you to play with ICSB. With that, I just made that up. So with
thank
that,
you for the kind invitation.
Absolutely. With that, I want to thank everybody for attending. And what I like to do now is also just remind everyone that last week we started the ICSB and USASB fireside chat, and it was very well attended. And there was a request to do a second one. So USASB is hosting a fireside chat today at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we are just delighted to have Dr. DeMero, Dr. Jill Kuckel, the president of USASB, and Dr. Christopher Winkler to discuss ICSB USASB fireside chat on entrepreneurship education. It's a faculty-to-faculty discussion. I promise you, they're not going to give you any tools on how to do an online class. They're going to have a discussion with you on online education from a faculty to faculty. So please go to the USASB site or the ICSB site to register. And this is going to be a great event this afternoon at 2 p.m. With that, I want to thank everybody around the world for joining us, especially our colleagues in Nigeria. We send you a big shout out from Washington and from Switzerland. And we hope to see you again. And we hope to see Dr. Marc again with us on the second round of playing with Where to Play the book. So with that, I thank you all and have a wonderful and safe day. And don't forget to wash your hands. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.